Welcome to AFrame Lesson 3.7. In this video, we're going to cover how to work with multiple cameras, which is analogous to a director who's shooting a movie, and they might want to capture different experiences by simply giving the user a different viewpoint of the same setting. So let's get to it. So we have a world here where we're surrounded by balls, and we really can't see everything that's going on because there's so many balls in front of us. It'd be kind of cool for us to be able to perhaps take a look at our world from the top of the cylinder, or let me see if I can capture it, or even maybe hop a ride on this dodecahedron that seems to be orbiting all over the world. All right, so let's work with the cylinder first. So for a while now, in a couple lessons, we've been working with this camera where we've manually positioned it. We've added a cursor so we can interact with the world. So we can add additional cameras by simply taking the same thing and putting it in other components. So by us taking a camera and putting it inside the cylinder component, it literally puts a camera inside the cylinder. Now the next thing we have to do is, because the cylinder has a height of 10, and when you put something inside of another component, it gets positioned in the center, we got to push the height of the camera, let's say by 5, so we're at the very top of the cylinder and not smack in the center. Now the next thing we have to do is, we have multiple cameras now. We got to be able to tell AFrame which one is the active one. So we're going to make our main camera the active one, and for the camera that's inside the cylinder, we're going to set its active value to false. Now you might say, well, why didn't you set this one to true? Well, by default, if you simply put the word active, it's going to assume that the value is true. In order to make something inactive, you have to explicitly put the word false for active. Now the other thing we have to do, we're going to want to be able to program these cameras, is that we have to have an ID for each so we can tell them apart. So we're going to call this one the main camera, and let's call this one the cylinder camera. Okay, so I think we have everything set up to actually start coding it. So let's create two variables to represent our two cameras that we just created. And I'm going to use the document get element by ID method of grabbing them, since they both have IDs. And let me copy and paste that and do the same thing for the camera that's on top of the cylinder. Okay, so now that we have the two cameras, we're going to use the keyboard, specifically the M and C keys, in order to activate each of the cameras. So let's add a window, add event listener to capture that key down event. And if you're unfamiliar with the Windows Add Event Listener, this was something that was covered in AFrame Lesson 3.6, so you're more than welcome to go to that video to further explore this particular logic. So let's make this the first one. So if the user presses the C key, we want to make the camera that's on top of the cylinder the active one. Now because this is an AFrame component, that means we can use the set attribute function to switch the active attribute to true. Now it's not enough to set this one to true. We actually have to take the main camera and set its active attribute to false. And that's pretty much it. Let's give it a try. All right, so here I am in the world. I want to get to the very top. I'm going to press the C key, and you can see now I'm on top of the world. And just kind of, oh, we don't see the cylinder. We'll correct that in a second. That's because I think we're still technically in the cylinder a little bit. But before we do that, I also want to show you something else that might be a little awkward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the arrow keys. And as you can tell, that camera still has the ability to walk. So we're kind of walking in air. And that might not be the functionality that you want. You might want to have simply the ability to, get to a location and look around, but not move. So let's head back over to our HTML and let's fix that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bump ourselves up a little bit in the world so we're not stuck in the cylinder still. Yeah, I think the value of 5 still puts us right flush with it, which is why when we look down, we didn't see the cylinder. The next thing we want to do is to kind of fix that ability of being able to walk in the world. Now, if you head on over to AFrame.io and click on A camera and pull up the attributes, you'll see that there's an attribute called WASD controls enabled. I'm going to go ahead and copy that just to save ourselves a little bit of typing. Let me put this here, and let's set this equal to false. Now, even though it says WASD, this also corresponds to the arrow keys. So let's try this again. Let's click on C to get on top of the world. And the first thing I'm going to show you is that when you look down, you can see that we're on top of the cylinder. And we could look around the world. And trust me when I tell you, I'm trying to use the arrow keys right now, and I'm not moving. I'm going to try to use the WASD keys, and I'm also not moving. All right, so the other thing we have to do is now we're stuck up here. So it'd be nice for us to get back down to the ground level. So let's go back to our script, and let's add another if statement, else if, where we check for the user to press the M key. Now, M is going to represent us wanting to get back to the main camera. So using the same logic, I'm going to set the main camera's active attribute to true, and I'm going to set the cylinder's camera active attribute to false. Let's try it again. And there's a cylinder. Let's get on top. Let's look around. Okay, I've seen what I wanted to see. I want to go in that direction. I'm going to press M, and now I'm back on the main ground, ready to go. And I can still move in this direction. All right, so let's take care of how do we hop on top of this dodecahedron. So we have a ship class here with some logic. Again, this is the one that's kind of handling the whole business of moving the dodecahedron around. So similar to what we did with the HTML, we have to create a camera and add it to the dodecahedron. Now, to save ourselves a little bit of time, I already have the code here, and let's just copy and paste it. So again, let me just explain what you're looking at now. So I've created a new object, this.camera, and just like we've created every other element, I created as an A camera. Like we did before, we set the camera's active property to false, just so it's not the active camera when we start off. And while we're here, we're also going to add the WASD controls enabled to false, so we can't walk off the dodecahedron. The next thing we do, which you might have practiced in previous lessons, we're actually going to take the camera and append it to the object. This has the analogous functionality of literally putting the camera in another object by simply appending it. And then we simply append this.object to the world as normal. Now, we're going to interact with the dodecahedron a little bit differently. Instead of pressing the keyboard, what we would like to do is simply click on the dodecahedron to jump on board for the ride. So for this, we're going to do an add event listener. On the A-frame component of the dodecahedron, we'll use click. And honestly, now I'm going to borrow a little code from the script. We essentially have to follow the same logic that we did here, where we're going to turn off both of these cameras and then set this camera, and I'm just going to copy that whole line. We're going to change this camera's attribute from false to true. Now the next thing, since we're here, might as well take care of it. And hope you can appreciate, because we've added another camera, we also have to add that logic over here as well. Where in this case, we can't use the word this. It's the camera that comes from the ship. So I'm going to put ship.camera. And I'm going to set this one equal to false. I'm going to grab this and also do this in this if statement. It's a little cleaning up here. Oops. And this one's also false. So when I press C, the camera in the cylinder becomes true. All the other cameras become false. When I press M, the main camera becomes true. The other two cameras become false. And when I click on the dodecahedron, the camera that's in the dodecahedron, the one that we have appended, becomes true, and the other two cameras become false. All right, so let's go to our world here, and let's check that out. All right, so let's just, review what we've done. So here's the cylinder, so we made that the active camera, and from here, I should be able to click on the dodecahedron to go along for the ride. Now the next thing I want to test is, can I walk off the dodecahedron? And trust me when I tell you, I'm trying to press the arrow keys and I'm not going. So let's see if I can get to the main camera from the dodecahedron. There you go. So we're back on the ground. And let's see if I can board the dodecahedron from the ground. So you can see we're back on the dodecahedron. And let's see if from the dodecahedron I can jump to the cylinder. And let's see if we can find that dodecahedron again. All right, so you can see here, now that we have multiple cameras, we could definitely switch between all these cameras to create a different experience. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. Let's review what we've done. So up until now, you've worked with one camera, but there's absolutely no reason you can't add multiple cameras to give your user a different experience by just changing their viewpoint. The process of working with multiple cameras is relatively simple. You literally add the cameras to whatever locations you want, and then set their active property to true when you want that camera to be the viewpoint of the user. Don't forget that you have to set all the other cameras' active properties to false. So hope you're excited by being able to give your user a very immersive experience, and enjoy.